Red Bull floor downgrade for Singapore 2022. Red Bull is looking to dominate yet another race weekend in Singapore as we go there in less than 2 weeks. Max Verstappen won 6 straight races, and although he is streaming to break some records, it probably won't be as easy as everyone is expecting to in Singapore. One factor that is making it harder for Red Bull to reduce the weight of its car, a problem that they've struggled with a lot in the 2022 season, is the budget cap. Therefore, the issue of the cost cap has forced the team to bring an upgrade to its floor, and it seems like they've managed to do it perfectly well and downgrade the floor to a level that will suit the car better throughout the city circuit in Singapore. Want to find out what Red Bull is planning to do in this GP? Stick around with us. The dominance of Red Bull has been something that bored many fans, but the Austrian team isn't willing to give up on demolishing the competition in every aspect. The team is constantly bringing upgrades to every race so far, and they've been able to develop a lighter monocoque that will allow the car to shed additional 5 kilograms of weight. While Leclerc was leading the season with 46 points ahead of Verstappen in the first 3 races, that wasn't the case in the remainder of the season, as Verstappen took a commanding lead and made sure that the championship will be decided far away from the last race. As we speak, Red Bull has a dominant lead in both of the championships, and Perez is looking to finish P2 in the Drivers' Championship for the first time ever, as they were close on multiple occasions in 2011 and 2012. Nevertheless, Red Bull won't give up on the upgrades, and one part of the car that they brought to perfection is its floor. Red Bull's car, more precisely the RB18, is having a floor that is looking like a labyrinth, and therefore the phenomenon of porpoising is nowhere to be found. If you compare their floor with the one of Ferrari and Mercedes, you'll notice how complex the RB18 floor is compared to its top 2 competitors. This is a very important thing since the 2022 cars use the ground effect in order to gain downforce, unlike before when the downforce was mostly granted through the rear and the back wing. Thanks to the amazing floor of the RB18, the car isn't porpoising nor bottoming out, which has been the main issue for Mercedes and Ferrari throughout the season. The air pressure stalls below the floor and therefore the car gains and then loses massive amounts of downforce. That is visible on the track as the phenomenon of porpoising. As for Red Bull, they've managed to design a floor that works perfectly well for both of its cars. We've seen this on multiple occasions, where apart from Verstappen's pure dominance, Perez was also able to complete some 1-2 finishes for the team and propel it to high in the Constructors' Championship. But since Austria, Perez's floor has been switched to a newer version that just doesn't seem to get the results that both the Mexican and the team would want it to. This was seen in France, where Verstappen was miles ahead of everyone else, and Perez was struggling to keep Russell behind, and eventually failed so due to the virtual safety car reset of the race. On top of that, he failed to keep Sainz behind too, and he was nowhere to be seen fighting Hamilton, who was ahead of him. Therefore, it's safe to say that the newer floor isn't working wonders. But why have they mounted it on Perez's car? And what does this have to do with Singapore? Red Bull's boss, Christian Horner, revealed that the floor decision was kind of forced on them due to financial grounds, as the squad is most likely unwilling to build another old-spec floor at this stage of the season amid the restrictions of the cost cap. Is this a real threat to Red Bull? Do they feel threatened by the budget cap? Well, it's not a secret that ever since the Russian invasion of Ukraine started, the inflation went well over 3%, and although teams have been granted financial help by the FIA, the restrictions are still the same. Therefore, upgrades have been kind of limited to what's only necessary for the teams. And the teams have been cautious when it comes to spending money on parts that the car doesn't really need. However, according to Christian Horner, the floor isn't playing that big of a role when it comes to the performance difference between Red Bull drivers. As he added, "You're talking minuscule differences. It's predominantly been driven by the availability of spare parts. I think the difference is probably less than 1/10 or approximately maybe 1/10 of a second. But Checo had a tricky race at Zandvoort and unfortunately got jumped at the restart, and I think probably with hindsight his tyre preference was the medium. I think with 2020 vision, the soft at the end would have been probably a better tyre to attack. There's still decent points for him," finished Horner. As for Perez, it's known that his last races are nowhere near what we've been used to seeing from the Mexican in the first couple of races. Although he is on the path to scoring his best career finish in the Drivers' Championship, Checo is far away from comfortable with the new upgrades of the car. He spoke about it publicly, adding, "I think in the beginning I was more comfortable. I could feel like every time I came to a weekend in FP1, I was already easily happy with the balance and things were coming natural. As the season progressed, it feels like it has become harder and harder. Every weekend I have to really go deep into the analysis. And yeah, I am not as comfortable as I was with the car before. Well, it's just going away from me in terms of how comfortable I was in the beginning. But saying that, I've only had 2 races of this and last weekend I wasn't up to it. I was feeling pretty bad, so I think this is the first weekend where I will see, really. But hopefully reliability issues are gone now and we're able to finish races. That is the most important thing," urged Perez earlier this season when he was so close to Verstappen in the championship fight. On top of the floor downgrade that Red Bull are planning to bring to Singapore due to the budget restrictions, we spoke about the lighter monocoque that they are planning to implement on both of their cars in Singapore. This is the chassis that many teams and experts speculated that Red Bull has already implemented in Belgium, but the team denied these allegations and said that they will respect the due course of this upgrade, which is in Singapore. Mattia Binotto questioned the legality of this financial move from Red Bull as he said, "I myself have no idea what they are doing, whether they have a lighter chassis or not. But the budget cap is always a concern. In addition to technical and sporting regulations, we also have to deal with financial regulations, and that can also cause differences between the teams purely by how those regulations are interpreted. We need a strong FIA who is on top of this because otherwise those rules are not fair and equal for everyone. But as I said, I can't judge Red Bull's lighter chassis and whether they have it or not, but I do know that Ferrari couldn't do that because of the budget cap," said Binotto, who continued to speak about other teams' possibility to do what Red Bull has done, adding, "I would be very surprised if another team turns out to be able to do that. And if it is, then we come back to the regulations. Are they fair enough? Do they seem equal for everyone? And is it adequately monitored? These are big question marks. The rules are still very new and are only checked by a small number of people, so that has to be improved with a view to the future. It would be a bad thing if the championship is determined by financial regulations and not through a technological battle," finished Binotto. It's worth mentioning that Red Bull have used $2 million out of the $4 million that has been granted to every team on the grid due to inflation, which is how the chassis has been invented and implemented in the team's financial plan. According to this, it seems like Red Bull will have some difficulties when it comes to winning the Singapore GP, especially after Mercedes announced upgrades for the W13, something that, according to Mike Elliott, will bring them back at the top and they will finally win a race this season. What do you think about Red Bull's plans of downgrading its floors in Singapore? Do you think that they'll struggle with performance? Let us know in the comments below.